Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March Superintendent's Webcast. We're so pleased to have you join us for another agenda and updates of things going on here at KDE that might impact you and your districts. You may have noticed today looks a little different from other superintendent webcasts that you have joined. As we have been examining our processes here at the Kentucky Department of Education, we really wanted to find a more streamlined approach to the superintendent's webcast. So as you join today, you may have noticed a few differences. We will be using Microsoft Teams with the green room and the Q&A features for future meetings. If you are joining using a browser, we do ask that you enter your full name when requested to enter that information. And then if you'll see at the top of the toolbar, there is a built-in Q&A feature right here in the meeting with us, and it's been made available for you to ask questions. In the past, we were utilizing a separate Google form, and that seemed a little inconvenient for superintendents to go back and forth, and also for staff here at KDE. So we've tried to find a methodology that works and is a little bit easier for all of us. Once the meeting has started, captions can be turned on by looking at those, the three dot where it says more on the top of your toolbar, and you can drop down to languages of speech and turn on live captions if you need to do that. For future meetings, it really is our goal to make things more convenient and easier for you. So it is our goal that the agenda and the PowerPoint for each of our superintendent's webcasts going forward will come out at the same time as the meeting invite. So that meeting invite is going to automatically populate on your calendar. And again, our fingers crossed, our goal is to have that agenda and PowerPoint with you to you at the same time. That way you'll be able to review it a little bit in advance and be able to determine if there are other people that you would like to invite to the meeting based on the topics that we're discussing that month. As we have rebuilt sort of the meeting invite for this, of course, we've invited lots of people that we had in the past. All superintendents invited, our co-op directors, lots of groups that have traditionally participated in this meeting. But I do want to share that we may have left someone off, and so that is not intentional by any nature. But if you hear someone that regularly participated in our superintendent webcast and for some reason is not getting that invite now, please encourage them to reach out to Stacy Ball. Stacy is my executive assistant here, and she is helping me build that distribution list to make sure that everyone is back on track with our invites. So just wanted to share that with you. We will continue as we populate those invites for the future. There'll be this additional information just as a reminder that we are doing things a little bit different, but our end goal is to make things just a little bit easier and more efficient for you. If we can go ahead and jump into the agenda and go to the next slide, please. Starting off with some welcomes from me, and then we'll turn to our Director of Communications, Jennifer Ginn, to give some KDE updates. Then we have two big topics on today's agenda. One is cybersecurity for superintendents. And I've asked David Couch, our Associate Commissioner of OET, and Bob Hackworth, our Chief Information Security Officer, to join us today. You know, this is a really hot topic in districts right now, and I know that David and his team are talking frequently with your district technology officers, but we thought this might be a good idea to talk about this directly with superintendents, sort of the space that we find ourselves in cybersecurity. And then also, of course, we are still in the legislative session. It seems like it has been going on for a long time, but we are in the home stretch, I would say. Less than 10 days that we have on the calendar, really, until we get to those veto days and then sine die. So I've asked Brian Perry, our policy advisor and the Director of Government Relations, to join us with sort of a brief update on what's happening in the General Assembly. And then, as always, questions and answers from the KDE leadership. And again, I point your attention to the Q&A feature at the top of the toolbar to ask those questions of us. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. I guess what's really been on everyone's mind right now, and I'm pleased to report that we are making progress. Some of you may have seen the announcement that was sent out yesterday, but I did want to share with you the things that have been happening in our search for the next commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Education. The internal KBE interview committee met on March 7th and 8th, and with the help and assistance of McPherson and Jacobson, who is a national executive search firm that has been assisting the interview team, 3 finalists have been selected for continued consideration for the position of commissioner. The 3 finalists are Dr. Buddy Berry, Dr. Robbie Fletcher, and Dr. Jim Flynn, all from Kentucky. And I'm not going to read their brief little resume there on the page for you. I think many of you will see all 3 of these gentlemen as very familiar faces in the public education space here in Kentucky. And we are very pleased that we have the first kind of round behind us. We do express our appreciation to all the applicants who expressed interest in this very important position, and are pleased that we are moving along in our search process. Next slide, please. So what happens next? We have our named 3 finalists, and similar to the steps taken in local school districts whenever you are hiring staff, the search firm will continue to assist the Kentucky Board of Education with background checks on all of our finalists, and the KBE will be provided the results of those as we move forward. The finalists will be interviewed by the full Kentucky Board of Education on March 18th and 19th in Louisville. And we hope to have a new commissioner named and submitted to the Kentucky Senate for consideration by the end of the month. So that's the end of this month in March. It will really be upon us very quickly. You can, of course, read all about sort of our progress at any time on the KDE's 2023-2024 Commissioner Search webpage. So we're very excited that we're moving along with our search. Congratulations are in order. We have 2 Kentucky schools that have been named 2023 National ESEA Distinguished Schools. The 2 are among 65 schools nationwide to receive this honor. And so my congratulations on behalf of the Kentucky Department of Education to Lure Elementary School in Jefferson County, recognized for exceptional student performance for 2 or more consecutive years, and also to Hunter Hills Elementary School in Laurel County for excellence in serving special populations of students. Next slide, please. And we're going to continue with this congratulations theme. It's always a pleasure to announce lots of good news across the Commonwealth. Congratulations are in order for Sarah Wilder, a 5th grade social studies teacher at W.R. McNeil Elementary, that's in Bowling Green Independent. Sarah was named the Gilder Learman Institute of American History 2023 Kentucky History Teacher of the Year. Ms. Wilder will receive a $1,000 prize, a course archive of American history books and other education materials, and she will be recognized for the award at the Kentucky Historical Society's Annual History Awards. This also puts Sarah in the running along with 53 other finalists for the 2023 National History Teacher of the Year Award. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to again express my sincere appreciation to each of you who have allowed me to come and visit your schools and districts. I know it is a lot of work whenever you have any visitors coming to your schools and districts, and it has just been a sincere pleasure, and I have enjoyed every minute of it. You know, I've had this opportunity to personally observe all the good work and the opportunities that you are providing to your students and your staff. And my most recent visit, as you can see on the page on this slide, was to the Kentucky School for the Blind, and I went yesterday. I learned about robotics and coding and the upcoming solar eclipse with students. We did a little song in a music class, And then I also learned about independent living skills, which are so important for the students at both the Kentucky School for the Blind and Kentucky School for the Deaf. And I do look forward to continuing these visits across the Commonwealth. These visits really allow me to see firsthand the work that you're doing and to share the good work with KDE staff here, also with other educational partners, and very importantly with our legislators. It's really important that they understand and hear from all of us the good work that you are doing each and every day in Kentucky Public Schools. And now, if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer again, and Jennifer is going to continue to provide some KDE updates. You're on mute, Jennifer.
I knew I was going to do that. I can never do a superintendent webcast without doing something stupid. All right, thank you. As usual, some more information about competitive grants, and I'm glad that you all are finding this useful. I keep on hearing from our staff that they get a lot of hits and a lot of applications after we do this, so we hope it continues to be useful. First up is an FY24 Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Fund mini grant. Applications closed March 19th at 4. Award amount is $40,000, and it's to support K-3 students in reaching proficiency in reading and writing through the purchase of high-quality instructional materials aligned to the KAS for reading and writing. Then we have the FY24 Preschool Quality Partnership Grant. The deadline for that is 4 p.m. Eastern Time, March 22nd. Award amount up to $300,000, and it's to support full-day, high-quality early childhood services for 3- and 4-year-old preschool children. Okay, next slide, please. One more is the FY24 McKinney-Vento Homeless Children Education Grant Program, deadline April 18th at 4 p.m. Award amount varies. It's the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support issuing an RFA from local educational agencies to develop and implement programs that facilitate the enrollment, attendance, and success of homeless children and youth in school. So if you have any questions about any of those, or you're looking for materials, you have the link here to the KDE Competitive Grants webpage, or you can always email Jennifer Bryant, and you can see her email address right there. Next slide, please. We are coming upon real quick at the end of the week. We're going to open up a recommendation form for the Kentucky Exemplary Educators Program, KEEP. This is something that is relatively new for us. We started this one last year. We're hopefully going to be doing some recognitions fairly soon with the people who submitted recommendations during the last cycle. You're going to read some more about this in the Monday message, and it's going to be on KDE's website. We're also going to be sending out a press release about this. You can recommend up to 3 certified teachers, teacher specialists, assistants, or principals currently serving in Kentucky's public schools. The ones who are, a selected number of them are going to receive a certificate of excellence from KDE, and the commissioner may not know this, but we're trying to line up a few times where we can send her out with the certificate herself. So hopefully they'll be coming up before too long. The people who are submitted also may be considered for other recognitions and opportunities like serving on advisory panels, committees. We have a lot of those who provide us some valuable input. Individuals should demonstrate exceptional educational talent, exemplary educational accomplishments in leadership beyond the classroom, engaging and inspiring presence that motivates and impacts students, colleagues, and the community, and strong long-range potential for professional and policy leadership. So the recommendations are going to be accepted through April 15th. They'll start on March 15th, which is Friday. For more information, you can email our awards email right there, or contact Gliptosan Grider Jones, and there's her phone number. And I believe that wraps it up for me. Oh, nope. We are seeking feedback on draft Kentucky Academic Standards for Visual and Performing Arts. You can see the link to it there to provide feedback. Can we go back one? The deadline is April 4th, and questions can be directed to the standards inbox. All right, next slide. All right, and you've probably seen this. This has been in the Monday message for a few weeks. KBE is seeking applicants for the Kentucky High School Athletic Association's Board of Control, an at-large position. The position's going to become vacant on June 30th, and I believe the person who is in it is not eligible to refill it, if I'm remembering correctly. All interested individuals are encouraged to submit a letter of interest, a resume, and a minimum of 2 written letters of recommendation to KDE. Those materials should go to Todd Allen, who's the general counsel here. You can see the building address and his email address. And the deadline is for applications is March 30th, and the Board of Control member must not be a current employee of a Kentucky public school district. Next slide. All right, now we go to David Couch.
Thanks. And by the way, Jennifer, the person in it currently has termed out, so won't be eligible to fill that position. I also serve one of the roles with the High School Athletic Association liaison. Thanks for the time today. Appreciate this opportunity. Bob Hackworth, and I'll give his background in just a second, will be joining me. We're going to give you a background of cyber attacks and data breaches in Kentucky K-12 over the past 30 years. And it's important for you to know that as your position as superintendent, but also for you to regularly interact with your district's main education technology point of contact about that topic. And you're going to see us periodically send something to you all to say you really need to get with your district CIO, district technology coordinator, whatever you call them in your organization, to talk about a certain subject. And cybersecurity will definitely be one of those. Bob and I are pretty good about talking in human speak versus technology speak, but there'll be maybe a couple technology terms in there. We're going to cover 12 ways to prevent and to be prepared and react to a cyber attack. And we'll cover recommended actions at the beginning or during a known breach or cyber attack. So, but first let me introduce Bob Hackworth. He's been with us for 30 years. He's a former teacher. He was one of our field staff members for many years. He was part of the birth of the Kentucky Virtual High School, part of the birth of the Kentucky K-12 longitudinal data system, now called Kentucky Stats. And he's now, and Bob knows this in the meetings I regularly say, and I know he's the best K-12 cybersecurity officer in the nation. And I always say, folks, do not recruit him, but we're very fortunate to have Bob. As for myself, I mainly refer to myself as Mrs. Couch's son, who's a beloved, long-beloved teacher in Johnson County. I was fortunate enough to have the very first computer science courses taught in Kentucky. Howard Ramey was the visionary teacher that did that, and it shows, the difference that teachers and school districts can make on an individual definitely made an impact on mine. And then I was fortunate enough, after graduating from Johnson Central, that the United States Military Academy at West Point, it was the first year they required every freshman to take computer science, which I was very well prepared for, but it also really ignited my continued interest in the technology world. And I was fortunate enough, after graduating West Point, for the U.S. Army to send me to get a master's in computer science and in large-scale systems management. And then in the U.S. Army, I was the director of the first electronic warfare organization, which included unmanned aerial vehicles, which they call drones now, the very beginning of artificial intelligence, the very beginning of the internet, which we called ARPANET during those early days, and other systems that were used successfully in Desert Storm. My mom wanted me to find a safer career path, and so she encouraged me to join the birth of the Kentucky Education Technology System, which I did in 1992. And while we're not 100% perfect, Kentucky K-12 has been the pioneer and national leader in most aspects of education technology, including cybersecurity. Bob and I have been asked and have presented many times together on this topic in the state and national events. And we'll be sharing our collective advice and words of wisdom with you all today. And as that insurance commercial says, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. We don't intend to mention any districts by name today that have incidents. These are live incidents that have happened to districts. And we also share incidents that happen in districts and organizations in other states. But this will really be our best and combined words of wisdom based off 30 years of incidents that we've seen. I do want to say this, and I think this is important at the very beginning. And Bob, you and I talked about this ahead of time. We have consistently found over the past 30 years that the individuals involved and are responsible for a breach occurring within the organization are some of the most caring, trusted, conscientious, and capable, talented folks in that organization. And they're most commonly very upset and devastated of what it may mean to others beyond themselves that they greatly care about. They are typically the superstars within your organization, and they typically get so down on themselves. So great care and sincere and passion needs to be given to them by the leaders in the organization. And I'll just speak from experience. About 15 years ago, one of the very best people I've ever had or ever have in the Office of Education Technology did something that caused a breach. He was absolutely crushed and so incredibly hard on himself. And he thought this one mistake wiped out 10 years of outstanding work. And he accidentally posted on our KD website a real versus pretend Social Security number of a person in a district that's been used for munis training. It didn't wipe out all his good deeds. And Bob and I have both found in working with KD offices and districts after a breach occurred over the past 15 years, I have always found them and tried to be sensitive and sympathetic to the individual whose actions or lack of action led to the breach. I have never found them lackadaisical, unskilled, or uncaring. They almost always want someone to learn from their mistake so it won't happen to them too. So Bob and I will be using some analogies. I intend to use some like car doors and locks on car doors and keys as examples and crosswalk those in a non-techno speak way to a corresponding cybersecurity best practice. And just an example, a quick example. I live in a neighborhood and lived there for 30 years. And there's been 3 break-ins of cars in that neighborhood. The only cars that were actually physically broken into are the doors are the cars that had their doors completely unlocked. Anyone in our neighborhood that had their doors locked, the criminal was just trying to see if it was unlocked. And there's great analogy in the cyber security world of people just testing the doors of homes, testing the doors and the windows of homes. They are constantly checking to see if those are open. They're not doing, a very high percentage of the cyber break-ins are not due to them forcing their way in. Typically, it was a car door, just not left unlocked, but the car door was, they left it wide open. And these cyber criminals, as Bob told me before we started, they're just not frequently, they're constantly driving by a neighborhood and seeing if a car door is left wide open, you can visually see it, or a house door. And then if they can't see it, they're constantly checking to see if they can get in. We find over the years, the past 30 years, and I'll go back even my time as U.S. Army officer, there are 2 major kind of categories of breaches in an organization, and these definitely apply to K-12. The first one is, and this is the most common, I would say, Bob, and you follow up on these a lot more than I do on my behalf. It's where someone in a K-12 organization accidentally places or makes data available in an area that anyone without the true need to know to see it may or may not have seen it. And we find those in situations, and particularly in districts, where they're rushing to post a spreadsheet on a website for a board meeting and they forgot a certain column has Social Security numbers in it, or some other very sensitive information that was put on it. They've sent the spreadsheet to the wrong person. They printed out at the wrong printer that someone got. These are most normally the ways that a breach occurs in an organization. The second one out of the 2 categories is the criminal one. And we're going to spend the highest majority of our time on this one. Although some of the words of wisdom that we give will help you with this, we're going to spend our time on this. And this is where a cyber criminal aggressively and regularly tries to get into a K-12 organization's digital-based systems, their resources and data. So they're trying, and we're going to show a chart how often they try. And then we're also going to show a chart how successful they are in getting those systems in Kentucky K-12. Now, this success may not be due or may be due to someone within K-12 organizations' action or inaction. And I would just say this, having studied this, way too long and been nosed on it way too long. You have these cyber criminals, and we don't want to encourage them, even the ones that are watching this. But we do find those with the skill, opportunity, time, and termination. It is very difficult to stop them. But there are some things that you can do to dissuade them, and we're going to talk about those. But you may have people doing all the right things, and I've told you about the people this has happened to. These are outstanding people. And this actually, the words of wisdom we're giving to also apply to in your personal life at home. These are great people that you know. And I had a cousin that got tricked with gift cards. And I'll never forget her crying on the phone, just so upset for a variety of reasons. And so, and she's super smart. These are super, these are super smart people that it's happening to. So I always want to keep that in mind with this context, but we do want to make it harder on these folks to be successful, these cyber criminals to be successful. There are three main purposes of a cyber criminal break-in, three of them. The first one is to cause chaos, misery, and panic or mischief within an organization. And there are simple examples as putting inappropriate items on a district webpage, an inappropriate picture up on a district webpage, just to cause some chaos and just for their laughs. Others are to use stale accounts to quietly and covertly watch the organization for laws and periods of time before an attack. And a stale account is someone that has left your organization for quite a period of time, or they've left a role in your organization. I got to tell you, as a cyber criminal, this is one of the top things they look for in an organization because they can go undetected for long periods of time. And it's a weakness in any organization, but also in K-12, as you have people coming and going. People are pretty good about when they first get there saying, I want to set up my account. But folks are really bad about when they leave, making sure all those accounts are disabled and removed in a timely fashion. And cyber criminals know that, and they look for that. So they use those to attack, but they also use those, and this has happened fairly recently, to distribute inappropriate information from those accounts as if it came from the district. So that's the chaos one, and misery and panic. The number two is a moneymaker. This is, you'll hear the terms a lot, ransomware. We've had very few, thankfully, and I'll cover that in a little more detail, successful ransomware attacks over the past 32 years. We've had 0 districts in the past 30 years pay for ransomware. However, when a person, and the reason they don't pay for it is, by the way, you're negotiating with a criminal. You're just taking their word that they will not share it with anyone. And by the way, 99.99% probability, if you pay the ransom, they're going to share it. And so that's really where they get their bang for the buck. They've gone in, got access to data, and if the organization doesn't pay, then they usually, and they would do this anyway, sell the information that they've gotten into. We also see this, and Bob is really good about this. I guess it's a month from now, Bob, 2 months from now, where you make sure folks aware of the direct deposit scam and the tax scam. And this is where folks are acting like they are an employee in your organization and they want to change their bank account. And they're really changing it to the cyber criminal is what they're doing, and the tax forms as well. We also see it as a moneymaker for they're pretending to be a contractor and selling products, or even the contractor for your construction project, pretending to be them and pretending to want payment for something that they say they've delivered to you. And what they do is they closely watch, and because most of the things we do have to be very transparent, and there's good reasons for that. They are closely watching the timing of when things are paid. We had a major incident not far from here. It was like $3 to $5 million of a new construction of a school building. The cyber criminal watched the timing of that, pretended to be the CFO of the organization, pretended to be part of the company that was doing the construction. And by luck and some good fortune, the person that was supposed to receive it quickly made the district aware of it before that money was sent overseas. You see gift card. Go ahead.
David, now's a great time to mention the fact that a lot of us wonder how in the world these cyber criminals know who we are. and know who our financial officer might be, for example. And the unfortunate truth is that they have a lot of time. This is their day job, and they are researching us. And a lot of times, most of the time, in order to be helpful, we put all of our roles and job responsibilities on our websites so that our customers, the public, can reach us when they need to. And unfortunately, that gives cyber criminals a step up because they know exactly who to impersonate in order to trick a vendor or in order to impersonate a vendor to trick us. And that's just part of the world we live in now. The information we provide to be helpful is being used against us in a lot of ways.
Yep. The other one is gift cards. We see them impersonating the superintendent in the district and sending it to teachers in the district and say, can you give me, $100, $200 worth of gift cards to do this really good cause? And, the person in the district, the teachers or staff, want to help the superintendent or the principal. And so just make your staff very well if anytime asks for a gift card. Anytime someone wants payment in Bitcoin, this is in your personal life and your professional life, you need to be very, very suspicious of that. And the reason they want Bitcoin is it's near instantaneous them receiving payment anywhere in the world. If you use the traditional bank system in America, typically it takes days for something to be transferred overseas. Bitcoin is immediate and there's no reverse button on it. So
And
that's what?
It's also anonymous. So
it's also anonymous. Yeah, it's impossible to track it. The third of the three purposes of these cyber criminals to break in is to cause a lack of confidence and trust in organizations and also make them inoperable. And these are called denial. I'm going to use an example, distributed denial of service attack. You'll hear the term DDoS. And what a DDoS attack does, it focuses in on a certain resource within the district, like any kind of service you have, and tries to make it so nobody can use that. And anytime I describe this, I describe it like we have a Kroger in Versailles in Woodford County where I live. If I was a competitor and I did not want folks to go to that Kroger, if I was able to send 2 million cars at the same time, not Versailles small, to that area, no one could get near that store. No one can get out of it, but no one can get near it as well. And so in essence, I would have made that service that the Kroger provides inoperable. And it's Yogi Berra saying that, it's so busy there, nobody goes there anymore. And so they do the same type of thing with school systems. And I do want to make sure you're aware with DDoS attacks. And our staff, and OET has a service that we provide that we are constantly working on DDoS attacks to the district. So for the most part, every time you don't realize you're under a DDoS attack. Much like in the Air Force with Air Force aircraft, if the missiles fire toward it, there's something called chaff that is thrown out the back of the aircraft, and it draws the missile that's coming toward the chaff. We do something similar with the DDoS attacks. Once we notice the district is under a DDoS attack, usually within seconds, we divert that DDoS attack. At most, it's a minute. So you may see a disruption or a slowness in your network for a minute, and we divert that so you're not impacted by that. And it's actually the missiles are actually being shot at that chaff, but the cyber criminal isn't aware of it. And for the most part, we don't advertise that because we don't want the cyber criminals to know that they've been successful. And by the way, I want to make sure you're aware that, and this happens, it's not the majority of the time, is someone within the district has asked for that attack to occur upon the district. And that's not theory, that's reality. And there's reasons they're doing that, but they're trying to shut it down, try to shut down something from happening within the district they don't want happening during that time frame. And it's pretty easy to do. You can go buy a Visa gift card for $100. And what you're actually doing is you're paying one of these foreign companies that specializes in DDoS attacks, and $100 going to them to issue a X-minute DDoS attack against a specific site within a district. Bob, looks like you were getting ready to say something about that.
Yes, David, I think it's important to mention that over the course of probably the last 5 years, we've gone from getting maybe 20 DDoS attacks annually to literally getting over 300. And not only have they increased in number, They've increased in ferocity because where we might have one that would, be an inconvenience 5 years ago, some of the ones now that if we did not have the mitigation services to stop them from happening in their tracks, it would shut the state down. And so I think that it's important to know that attack can do that sort of thing.
So you have all three of those that are a big part, a goal and objective of cyber criminal: cause chaos and mischief, a moneymaker, and cause loss of confidence in trucks or make inoperable. So those are the big three. Now, just a reminder, in 2015, a law was passed that, along with requiring a cybersecurity health check, that every district do that at least once a year by the August timeframe, and KDE agency do that as well. Anytime a breach occurs, the Office of Education Technology, KDE, along with certain other state agencies that we regularly tell and we educate folks about, are to be immediately informed of a data breach. Now, you don't have to have the final investigation of it, but we want to know you've immediately it's happened. And our Office of Education Technology, wants to know immediately informed if you've had a cyber attack, even if it's not affecting a breach. Not only to help the district, but also to try to make sure it's not impacting our 170 other districts. So please put that on your radar screen to help. Sometimes if you have, something bad happen, you don't want, to really share that it happened, but we ask you to do that to help just not yourself, but to help others. And I would say this in general, and this is general in life: bad luck and good luck plays a role in anything. And if you get luckier, you get more good luck and less bad luck the harder you work, I think, of anything. And that definitely applies to cybersecurity. And, an example of really bad luck is you have a file server that your district owns that was turned off 2 or 3 years ago. You had no intention of ever using it again, but unfortunately that server in the district wasn't physically unplugged from the electrical power outlet, nor the internet plug to it was not unplugged. And then the power outage happened in your district and it turned that server back on. And unfortunately, that server hadn't had a security update done, which are typically done monthly or more frequently that, in 2 years, which made that server look like a wide open car door. It was unlocked, but wide open to cyber criminals. They're driving by at all hours, 3 a.m. at night, who are frequently and always looking for car doors to break into. It's additional bad luck on top of that if that server in the district allows the cyber criminal to parlay that into getting the top secret sensitive information like bank accounts, social security numbers of staff and students, even if the superintendent and others in the district had instructed certain staff in the district not to store that type of data on servers within the district. And also compounding it at the same time, if the district made it so a master key allows them to get access to every major system within the district, when it's best practice not to have a master key stored in a district like that. Those 3 items of bad luck in combination, and others like it in combination, can and will cause a significant cyber damage throughout an entire district where every system that you have in person is impacted. So we're going to share with you how you can get luckier with cybersecurity. And we're going to give you a little background. Bob talked about this. These are international organizations. They're professional. These are not just onesie-twosie folks. They're typically in pretty large buildings and organizations. They do this 24/7, 7 days a week and 365 days a year. Their governments are usually okay with them doing this. It brings a large amount of cash flow into their country. Some countries have the additional purpose of causing chaos and lack of trust to American organizations, so they get the bonus of that. We also have found, and we're going to show you some real data that backs up what we're talking about here, the organizations that are targeted the most by cyber criminals are educational organizations across the country, K-12 and higher ed. And Bob, if you could show that chart, please, and bring that up and share that. And what this chart shows, and most folks think that the financial industry is the one that's targeted the most by cyber criminals. You can see here close to 80%, 79.98, I'll call that 80%, of attempted cyber attacks. Now, these aren't successful ones, but these are attempted cyber attacks are toward educational organizations. And that always catches people off guard when we share this chart. So, why are educational organizations targeted far more than anyone else? Well, typically our staff, for good reason, are helpful and are trusting nature. The money that these staffs have, both state and federal and local. The data is of particular interest of them, particularly the Social Security numbers of students and other data like that. Typically, these organizations, their technology staff is understaffed. They get pushback within the organizations regarding implementing, more important cybersecurity initiatives, or they're just not aware of the scope of the threat. And Bob gave the example. It's like the folks in my neighborhood. What happens after they get their car? It's not really broken into. They get stuff taken out, and they've had stuff in those cars. There should be no way they're in cars unlocked. But typically, they're pretty good about locking those for 10 years, and then they get more lackadaisical about it, and then criminals know that, and so they circle back every 10 years and do the same thing. Sometimes the same, very, very same people in the organization. We've also had the number of cyber attacks. This is astounding. Bob's going to show a chart here. Before 2020, before pre-COVID, we had 4 billion with a B, attempted cyber attacks on Kentucky K-12 organizations. Now, these are not successful attacks. These are attempted attacks. During the beginning of COVID, that grew to 75 billion. Enormous growth. Now, post-COVID, it is now 125 billion attempted cyber attacks on Kentucky K-12 organizations annually. And Bob, if you could show the chart that we talked about, that kind of just shows in a very short period of time. I think this is the one we talked about, is just the number of people just trying to get into certain KD accounts. And typically you'll find that they're targeting the folks that handle money, the folks that are leadership roles within an organization. Yeah, if you can kind of go to the top. So the countries we on here this listing, for those that may be visually impaired, we list these countries of those that attempted but failed to get in. China, Korea, India, Russia, Brazil are the very top of that list. And Bob, kind of talk about what you gathered this from and its increasing nature of the attacks that we're seeing.
Sure. The chart you're looking at shows really about 12 hours of attempted logins to just about 10 KDE accounts. And so it's not all KDE accounts. This is just about 10 people in KDE. And within about an 8 to 12 hour period from outside of the United States, you had 5,000 of these attempted logins. Now, it's not because the folks in KDE are super special. I think that, if you looked at reporting for your own district, you would see something very similar. It's just something that very few people really recognize is happening. And so when we put a visualization to this like this, it really kind of brings it home that in the space of just a few hours, there have been over 5,000 attempted logins to just 10 people. Now, who those 10 people are is very important. Generally, what I like to say is it's people who have some sort of authority over, making decisions or accessing and transferring data or managing dollars. And so those 3 Ds, I think, are very important. And that's kind of what we see over and over. Now, everybody in KDE gets this opportunity to show up on the chart. It's not like they only focus on a few folks, but they do those same folks tend to rise to the top in terms of most targeted.
Thanks, Bob. And I think this helps give folks real numbers and real countries that we're seeing of folks trying to get in. And we just use ourselves. This is happening in districts as well. This is 24/7. It's avalanches of numbers of folks trying to get in. But it's just, showing a chart like this and the up-to-dateness of it kind of shows the reality of it. We also want to show, and Bob, get ready to show the next chart. And we're not trying to, I'm always hesitant in any setting to talk about how successful we are in Kentucky K-12 at you heard the massive amount of attacks we give, but there is an extremely low success rate of cyber criminals. And this is not said, and I'm always cautious of talking about this, is trying to motivate cyber criminals. But the chart here shows is overall, we have a sliver of successful cyber criminal break-ins throughout and breaches throughout Kentucky. California's a big state, Georgia's a big state, but even states of similar size, we are toward the very bottom of that occurring. And I talked about good luck and bad luck. Well, this is not just pure luck that's occurring. There are lots, and it's okay to take that off, Bob. Now, there's a lot of things that we're doing at the Office of Education Technology level on behalf of all KD staff and all districts that make it very difficult for district or for cyber criminals to break into any K-12 organization. A lot has to go back in time with our Kentucky Education Technology System. I talked about earlier, we're a pioneer, national leader in most aspects of education technology, but one of those things that plays a big role in that is our Kentucky Education Technology System is called KETS, Product Standards and Designs. We have the same student information system throughout Kentucky. There's lots of benefits of that, besides cost benefits and efficiencies. We have the same financial management system, Munis. We have the same internet service. We have the same teacher certification system. These four things no other state in America is doing. And that simple thing in itself makes it very difficult for cyber criminals to break into something across our state because of our statewide design and approach. Our network design, our internet network design has made it so they're very difficult. There's a very technical term called private IP addresses that make it very difficult to do that. When Kentucky became the first state in the nation, they have internet access to every district, every classroom, and every school back in the 1990s. We got these IP addresses, these internet addresses that allowed us to do something very unique in America to protect our school districts, and that really makes it harder on them. Most recently, we've adopted multi-factor authentication. Most of you in your personal life have done that. With your banks, require a couple steps to do that. We have X number of districts that have not done that yet. Highly encourage you to do so. I'll use a governmental organization outside of Kentucky and Long Island. Do a little search on what happened to Long Island, and they'll tell you over and over again, the cyber criminals would have had nowhere near the impacts of success had they implemented multi-factor authentication in the organization. And this is a governmental organizations that fought back hard against it. And much like any time with cyber criminals, these are typically organizations that fought back hard, and they will say, well, why didn't you force me to do it? Even though they fought back with every breath that they had in doing it. We also do something called geo-blocking, which if something comes from outside the United States, we make it a little tougher. We're finding these cyber criminals are relocating to spots within the United States. So that works. Bob does a really good job with the cybersecurity framework we call Playbook that he gives out. He does a spring cleaning guidance that we were having all kinds of discussions with your CIOs and ed tech leaders. There's a 2015 law that we talked about that requires that the technology staff, and I do that with our commissioner and board every year by their Oz, talks about the strengths that we have, the weaknesses we have, the vulnerabilities that we have, including spending a lot of time on the data systems that we have. And I encourage you, if that detailed discussion is not occurring with you annually, I encourage you to do that starting immediately and definitely going forward if you have that done. And we'll send out some reminders at the beginning of the school year because we recognize there's changeover of staff, of superintendents, of technology staff, that we just need to make sure this gets on their radar screen as much as possible. The main focus of our services in the Office of Education Technology over the past 32 years, along with our Kentucky Education Technology System partners, KETS partners, along with districts, has been toward the prevention of a successful attack. And we all do that together extremely well. And then we're going to discuss some of the simplest things that you can reduce your odds by close to 99% of a very successful wide-scale attack in your district that impacts nearly every person, shuts down nearly every digital system, and that has some of the most sensitive information that can be obtained from you. We'll also discuss with you and recommend in these very rare situations, catastrophic situations, when you experience an attack so severe that it impacts every person, some of the things that you should do. Let's start out with ransomware. Over the past 34 years, there have only been 3 to 4 successful ransomware attacks in Kentucky K-12. Prior to November, they were very small in nature and quickly stamped out. However, in the November timeframe, we had the largest ransomware attack in Kentucky K-12 history that impacted nearly every computer, server, services in that district and got access to very sensitive information. So the part we always try to take a look at, is that just a very rare event and there are certain sequences that happen within that district, or is this the beginning of a trend? We're not sure, but we need to be prepared for both of those. The second are situations not really related to ransomware, beyond ransomware, that have happened in districts over the past 30 years. And we put this in a category that, and there's a document we have, it could happen to you, and it could happen to you, but don't let it, where we kind of break down, I use a sports analogy of the game film, and then share the lessons learned of wisdom advice that helps you get through the same thing and be better prepared. So we're going to go over now with the basic preventative methods, and many of these are not an additional cost to your districts. And the more of them you do, the luckier you will get. The less of them you do, the unluckier you will get when it comes to cybersecurity. Number one, and the most successful method is not really a technology one. It's the people side of it. It's training for you and your staff on the basics of how to be savvy about cybersecurity and responsible for protecting, just like your keys of your car, keys to your home, the keys to their desks in their offices, their accounts, we'll call those accounts that they may have, they're like digital accounts, their classroom, wallets, purses, and money vaults in a building. And these are really simple ones, and people push back on them. And then when something happens to them, then it's easier to implement an organization. We really try to do preventive things, ahead of time, but sometimes it takes going through a really bad thing to get folks' attention. Strong passwords. People will push back on strong passwords. They're not easy to guess. That is one of the best things you can do as an individual in your personal life and professional life. Get wise about what we call phishing attacks. It's not like phishing that I enjoy doing. It starts with a PH, phishing. And these are attacks mainly done through email that try to trick people into giving up their username and the keys to their house and their car, their password. And these folks are getting very, very savvy about it. So we need folks savvier and savvier in how to recognize these phishing attacks. I talked about multi-factor authentication. There's many levels of that. You have multi-factor authentication with Munis. You can have it with campus. You can have an email system. You're seeing this in your personal life. It does add a hassle factor to the person to doing it. But man, it just makes it, talk to Long Island. If they wish they had done, like I say, if they had done that. But I talked about be cautious of gift cards, direct deposits, and someone pretending to be a vendor under construction and Bitcoins. And the other one is, in KD agency, and our staff that are watching know that we have banners that come with the email. And it immediately tells you if the email came from someone outside your organization. And you got to regularly tell staff, if someone's pretending to be a superintendent, this will catch them because they'll give a banner and they'll have the superintendent's name, but it'll say this email originated from an organization outside this organization. So if someone's impersonating our commissioner position, which they do often, and we work with the commissioner's position and the commissioner staff often on the basics of this, we try to get the rest of our staff that may get a message because they say, well, the commissioner contacted me. Do a simple thing. Did you get a banner at the top of your email that said it came from outside this organization? That's a tip, a strong tip. It's not really the commissioner. So think about putting that in your organizations as well. And I would say this too, and this is an Army term. When I was a U.S. Army officer, I had a top secret SCI clearance, which is the highest level clearance you can have. And I got to know the term, it's called need to know. And I remember when I first came to the Department of Education, I spent some time with that term of need to know. Not everyone at the same level in the organization or even at different levels of organization has a true need to know to see certain data, but they may get upset about it. They may want it, but they may not need it. As a captain and a lieutenant in the Army, I had access to data that most of my fellow captains and lieutenants did not. But they didn't get upset because my job demanded and required that I have access to information. The same thing on a smaller scale requires it in your organizations. I have found folks get upset if they're whatever level, what you may have in your organization or different levels, if they don't have the same access, but they really truly don't need that. And what that benefits you to is if you do have a break-in of their specific account, that person can't parlay that into more things, and especially if they did not really have a true need to know. Number 2 of the 12 is reduce the attractiveness of your district to cyber criminals. Put yourself, and Katie regularly tries to do this, on what we call a healthy data diet. Data is like money to districts. The more of it you have stored and available in your organization, the more likely you're going to attract cyber criminals to your organization. And these are things like Social Security numbers, particularly student Social Security numbers, bank account numbers that you may have put there locally. Those are examples of it. But even example is old data. And this goes back to the breaches that we have are commonly by folks that forget that a Social Security number was part of a spreadsheet, that someone put it in 5 years ago, that it should have been taken out, or they forgot they even had the spreadsheet and they forward, this group of files to forward for getting it forward there. You need to go through a process regularly within your organization. Are you on a healthy data diet? And get rid of old files you no longer need. Definitely no longer need by law. I mean, there's certain things you're supposed to retain after a period of time. But a very high percentage of these fall in this category. It's way beyond that period of time where they no longer needed it. But it's very, very valuable to a cyber criminal. I would also say part of being on make yourself a lot less attractive is take a good look at the file servers that your organization buys and manages. For the most part, well, I will say this before I introduce that. Kentucky is the national leader in cloud-based computing, Kentucky K-12. Just not to compare to K-12s across the United States, organizations and government organizations of any type, including here in state government, and including the private sector. We recognized 15 years ago the tremendous advantages of cloud-based computing, which means the file servers, instead of residing physically within the buildings, they reside with a service provider where you're transitioning and sharing risk of these servers. And sharing of the risk includes making sure they're cyber secure. We call patching. The security of that is up to date. That you're doing regular backups. The reasons ransom attacks are so devastating to organizations, and particularly what happened in Long Island, is folks didn't have backups. The nice part about finding a cloud provider, they do backups, and they have multiple sites across the United States, to where if this site goes down, this site automatically is bringing up, and they're automatically doing those backups. What ransomware providers and attackers are counting on, first of all, you have some kind of data that would be embarrassing to be out there that you don't want to get out. But secondly, they're assuming you've not backed it up or not backed it up in a while. Therefore, you're willing to pay to get your backup data back. The nice part about these providers, these cloud providers like we use for Infinite Campus and Munis, your email systems, teacher certification, there's many others, is that transfer, that risk is transferred to them, and they keep up with it 24/7, both the cybersecurity of it. So on the other side of that, if you are in a district buying servers, you need to have a discussion with your technology staff. What servers do we actually have to have? And do we have a really good strategy for keeping those up to date and patched and backups of those in multiple locations? And I would say this is, there's a particular type of service that districts do for good reason. It's called PDQ deploy, PDQ deploy. This is a server that the districts buy and the district staff maintain. That perhaps needs to have one of your top levels of cybersecurity of it, and you're not sharing a key or the passwords between different systems, that if someone breaks into your environment, breaks into your car, breaks into your home, they aren't able to parlay that into doing much more damage by having something that can send something to every computer that you have in your organization. And the PDQ is for a good reason. It does really good things and helps out with cybersecurity. But in the wrong hands, if someone gets that password and username, they can use it for devastating types of impacts. So you want to create accidents. By getting rid of that old data, you prevent an accident, and you make it much more harder for them to get in your front door. And I'll use a legal term, you remove an attractive nuisance to your organization. Number 3, and this is a more technical one, is make sure you don't have any front doors of your digital system left wide open, not even closed, but not locked, that are visible to cyber criminals that can see them and quickly get in through them. And it's like that car door example I gave. You got to make sure the car door is not left wide open. And if you do close it, make sure you lock it. I know I checked. My car wasn't one of the ones impacted by that. I regularly check my indoor locks of the car, or the locks in my car in the home every night. There is something every district can do, and we recommend you do that. We recommend this for years to the technology staff to do, is there's a way that you can see immediately and regularly if you have a server within your organization that is visible and open to the public and to cyber criminals. I'm going to list 4 ways. There are free tools that your district staff can do to test what the folks can see from the outside that are vulnerable. These are free tools. You can use them daily. You can use them hourly. Number 2 is you can pay a vendor. Now that pays a cost. Now, we're going to talk about getting a cybersecurity health check every year, but you can pay a vendor. Number 3, there is a free service. Bob, who does that free service for us?
It's the CISA, and they're the Cybersecurity Infrastructure group in the federal government, and they're actually offering that free service to us, and we're recommending it out to the districts, as a matter of fact. And
the key part about that one is you can get it weekly if you want, or monthly, but you got to have someone reading it and reacting to it. So, and we were to make districts once again aware of this free service. It's been around for years. Looks from the outside. It's not something that only OET staff can see. And I wouldn't mention well, you're going to say something about it. I'll mention
Yeah, I was just going to mention, it's perfectly normal to have things in your district that are available to the outside internet. Websites and applications that your folks use, your parents and even kids. Perfectly normal. What you don't want is if any of those services or servers or websites are sharing too much information, or they're available and they shouldn't be. It's supposed to be something that is private inside your district. And what the CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, does is it will go out there and make sure that all the software is up to date, so that cyber criminals can't get in by using a compromise that they know from, because it's old software. They'll find out if there's information that is being posted out there that shouldn't be, for example. And then they will go ahead and automatically, they check it every day, and you get a weekly report for that, which is super nice. And then that will tell your technology folks, oh, we've got a problem here. We need to go look at this server or this service and try to take that down. And sometimes, that will prevent you from something that's pretty bad.
Bob, the 4th way that's free is our OET staff does that. We've been doing that for years. So there's 4 ways a district can have that looked at. Also, you want to make it number 4, you want to make it so there's not a master key. I gave an example that I call it, if you watch the Andy Griffith show, the Barney Fife key. The reason you don't want to do that, have a master key that opens everything, every server within your organization, that's a username and password, is they get into all that. So you want to make it more difficult, and that doesn't cost additional cost to do that. Number 5, make sure, we gave the example, don't store your bank account numbers, social security numbers within the district, keep that in the cloud. Number 6, we regularly pay for and get an in-depth cybersecurity health check from an independent qualified organization. Number 7, make sure your user accounts, this goes back to need to know, has the right permissions. Not everyone has to have the right permissions. When someone leaves, get rid of those stale accounts. Number 8, within your organization, make sure you have enough and the right people to provide cybersecurity. It's definitely a pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. This is a people side of technology that we regularly talk to folks about to make sure you have that within your organization. We regularly put out best practices. We meet monthly with your district CIOs in a variety of meetings. We encourage you to talk with them to make sure that's occurring, because we're sharing information to them, and that's a blind spot for your district if they're not positioning in the monthly webcast we do for districts, which is unique in the United States. We also have field staff that does that along with your required annual check. Number 9 is encryption. Now, this is a more technical one of your computers. This will help you if someone breaks in or breaks into a window of a laptop. It turns whatever's on that laptop unusable to a cyber criminal. I would say this, if you do have those, and these are mainly, if you have a plan on what you need to do before you do it. Have an emergency response team identified. If you have one, and especially if it's a serious one, OET, Office of Education Technology, is part of that response. We have been over the years. We also use districts around you. In any crisis, whether it's a flood or tornado, we have found it in these instances, that in these situations of cyber, the districts around you are really willing to help and want to help. Have even companies to help you. Now you can get insurance companies, and that comes part of the free service to do that, for the insurance companies to do that. Or you can pay them. Sometimes getting insurance, and the federal government will tell you this, is it attracts cyber criminals because they think they'll get paid. But in these insurance companies have you go through and do some very specific things to protect yourself, but it's a plus minus that you're always called to do that. In the case of big break-ins, these insurance companies can be very helpful with their forensics immediately, and definitely part of the team. I would say number 11 is make sure when you have something, you find where the water is coming through, and just don't do drywall over it. Spend time. So if you have a door that's wide open, or you have a big hole in the roof, you got to make sure you cover that roof before you do some areas of putting drywall over ceiling that has collapsed because of it. And be thoughtful, I would say, in 12, of how you use artificial intelligence for research and meetings. If you have a spreadsheet that has Social Security numbers in there and you forget about it, is that analysis is done, it's great, but that goes to a general population of people that can get that anytime. We do have an additional budget request for district staff and resources and for OET staff to better provide cybersecurity. We're hoping superintendents will be supportive of when you hear CETS funding, Kentucky Education Technology System funding. That's what we're talking about. Our conference starts tomorrow for all the CIOs across the state. In Louisville, we have this annually. And two of our big topics, along with a couple others, are artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. So I encourage your staff to be there and bring back what they learn from there. And I would say everything boils down to the very end here. You have strong authentication, good passwords, no sharing of them, multi-factor authentication, protect your files with encryption and going to the cloud with minimal access. Keep your application and software up to date, and do a lot of cybersecurity awareness training, and have a plan when it goes wrong, because it will go wrong. So, Bob, for a quick closing statement, I appreciate everyone's time on this particular topic. Bob, we know we usually get 3 to 5 minutes, and even when we're on a conference, a general conference, not with technology folks, we're typically the last thing on the agenda, or not given time at all, and so you got 3 to 5 minutes. So I appreciate those giving us more time. This is a very serious subject. And it is a pay me now, pay me later, and it's a pay me now with money, but it's also pay me later with all the chaos and the devastation it causes to a district and organization. Bob, a quick closing sentence or two, if you could.
Sure. I really do appreciate everyone's time here. And again, it's one of those things where there's no such thing as 100% secure. Our goal is to make you as secure as possible. So, we force, or we encourage the cyber criminals to go somewhere else, to go to another state. And I don't really wish bad luck on any other state, but we really do want to make sure that they don't spend a whole lot of time looking here at Kentucky. Everyone, I think, is really focused on cybersecurity. But again, mine and David's focus is making sure that we're as safe as we can be, while at the same time making sure that everyone is still able to do their jobs. And that's teach, learn, manage the bills, that sort of thing. That's our big goal there. As you said, at some point, something's going to break, and we want to be there and help out, and we want to make sure that we can give you good information as you recover from that break, whatever it is. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, David and Bob. We appreciate you sharing with us today. We did allow a little bit longer on this topic than we do on other topics because it is very important. And I will say, from the department's perspective, David and Bob have done a real good job in heightening our awareness as KDE employees, simply because the word, I guess, would be mitigate, mitigate, mitigate. So we're just trying to do everything we can to mitigate that bad luck that might come along. So thank you both for presenting today. Our next presenter is Brian Perry, and Brian's going to give us an update on what's happening in the Kentucky General Assembly.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is day 49 of the 60-day legislative session. So after they gavel out today, they will have 9 days left to the veto period. That starts the Thursday before Good Friday. And then they will reconvene after the veto period for the final 2 days of the legislative session. Those right now are scheduled for Friday, April 12th and Monday, April 15th. I would not be surprised if they redo the calendar and make the final day of the session Saturday, April 13th. So you may want to just make note of that. I'm sure everyone has been following along, but if not, you'll notice that there are the links to the 2 ways to follow along at home or at work, what's happening in the committees. They're all streamed live on one of those 2 sources. So please tune in. You may especially want to tune into the Senate A&R committee tomorrow, because you'll see right below that the budget process. Tomorrow we'll see the Senate version of the budget unveiled about 10 a.m. Eastern time, and that'll be streamed live probably on the KET channel. So with that, we'll move along. And I'm going to go pretty quick here because there's about 1,200 bills between the 2 chambers. So a lot of legislation that we're tracking. I think we have 250 bills on the bill tracker chart. So we're just going to hit some highlights. So SB 2 is a follow-up to this school safety bill from, I think, 2019, predates me. But it's a follow-up to that. In addition to some issues regarding student mental health, there's also some language in there about school guardians for those that are unable to hire SROs. I'm sure you've heard some debate on that the past couple of weeks. That one has cleared the Senate and is now over in House Education. Senate Bill 11 got out of Senate Education this morning and is now on the floor of the House. It is trying to speed up the process by which districts are notified once a student has a serious charge against them. So I think now it can take upwards of a week or more for schools to get notified, and they're trying to close that timeline so that districts are notified much sooner. Next slide, please. So the same sponsor filed Senate Bills 169, 170, and 171. They're all in Senate Education right now, so they haven't really started to move, but you may want to keep an eye on them. They are related to things that have been happening throughout the year. It would make some pretty significant changes. So if one or all of those finally starts to move, you'll definitely want to pay attention to that. Senate Bill 210, I'm sure a number of you have weighed in on at various points so far. It picked up some significant changes in committee the other day. It's now on the Senate floor. I suspect we'll see some more amendments via floor amendments before it clears the Senate. Initially, it had districts setting aside 10% of seats for non-resident enrollment. So this is a bit of a follow-up to House Bill 563, that non-resident bill from, I think, a year or 2 ago. So we'll continue to work on this one. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about it. Don't know that this one makes it across the finish line this year, but I suspect if it doesn't, this will be a topic of conversation that continues throughout the interim period. Senate Bill 232, I didn't put on here, but that one's important now because it may be the vehicle by which we see House Bill 678 from 2020 codified. So that was the bill that opened up or kind of streamlined the construction process for districts, took KDE out of that process. It wasn't really called a pilot project, but those provisions sunset at the end of the fiscal year. So if we want to see those continue as stakeholders, we will need some legislation. Thought it was going to be a different House bill that was going to move. That does not appear to be the case. So now we have Senate Bill 232 that is moving. It's awaiting assignment in the House. And that right now looks like the best vehicle to see 678 get codified. So you might want to check that one out. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of different bills related to a constitutional amendment to be put on the ballot this fall that would change the way education funding can happen in Kentucky. That would allow for things like vouchers and charter schools. Senate Bill 358 there near the bottom is the Senate version. That one may start to move. Right now it's in Senate, state, and local government. There's also a House version we'll talk about. So expect one or more of these to move, but I think it's almost certain that a provision regarding this topic does make it on the ballot this fall. Just as a reminder, because there are a number of other constitutional amendments floating out there, they can put 4 at a time on the ballot. So they are a bit limited in that regard. So next slide, please. All right, over in the House, you'll see House Bill 2 is their version of the constitutional amendment. We saw House Bill 208 filed a little earlier in the session. That one is probably unlikely to move. I just saw that House Bill 2 will actually be heard this afternoon upon adjournment. So it is starting its journey toward the Senate. So expect that one to get out of the House here pretty quickly, maybe even by the end of the week, and then move over to the Senate for consideration. House Bill 162 is one you've also probably heard a lot about. We've been working on this one for quite a while now. This is a bit of a follow-up bill from Chair Tipton to his work on the early literacy initiatives the past couple of sessions. That finally got done in conjunction with Chair West in the Senate last session. So now moving on to addressing early literacy, early math education. So initially, the first version of this kind of focused on grades 4 to 8 intentionally to try to not overlap with the Read to Succeed legislation that was just passed. Feedback from the field was they wanted that expanded to K-8, and so we've seen a number of versions of this bill so far. It's over in Senate Education now. We'll see if we can get it across the finish line. If not, this is another one that I suspect we will talk about quite a bit during the interim and see a version of next session as well. Next slide, please. So House Bill 275 and 300 are a bit related in that they deal kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. House Bill 275 is now, they're both over in Senate Education. House Bill 275 is a version of a bill we saw last year that is trying to close a few loopholes that allow the very small number of bad actors to move districts without ever being held accountable. Obviously, we recognize that the vast majority of our teachers are excellent and care greatly about this health and well-being of their students. This is just trying to address that very small number that do manage to move between districts with kind of allegations hanging out there but never resolved. House Bill 300, on the other hand, addresses sort of the other side of that, which is when there is a complaint made against a teacher, how quickly can that be resolved? Obviously, this is a very complex process, a lot of people and organizations involved in those, so we have been working on that one. But like I said, both of those are over in Senate Education, so very near the finish line for both of those potentially. House Bill 387 is one of a few different bills out there relating to certification. This one, among other things, removes the 64 college credit hour requirement for substitutes and allows, but does not mandate that districts can have substitutes with just a high school diploma or GED. But it does open that door for districts that are having difficulty recruiting substitutes, districts that have a depth of substitutes already with the current requirements are not forced to take teachers with less credentialing, but it certainly opens the door for those that need to. And that one is awaiting assignment in the Senate. Next slide, please. I'm sure that everyone has heard about some transportation issues that have been happening in some districts over the course of the school year. House Bills 446 and 447 are from the same sponsor and are trying to address different issues with that transportation element. So 46 addresses student conduct on buses, and 47 would allow for districts to utilize up to nine person passenger vehicles a little more liberally. So we have weighed in on that transportation piece, especially just reminding districts that the safest way to transport students is on traditional school buses. They're big, they're heavy, very visible. But we have worked in some essentially compromise on using those passenger vehicles. And I think that those are both posted for passage tomorrow in the Senate and will likely both pass and go to the governor for action. House Bill 499 is another one that moved out of committee this morning for the second time. This made it out of House Education a little earlier in the session, got recommitted to Appropriations and Revenue, and got out this morning. This is another one that I'm sure you all have talked to folks about or heard about. This would change the way that CTE appropriations are distributed. This is not an appropriations bill. It is just dealing with the distribution of a potential appropriation. If you remember back in 2020, the General Assembly upped the amount of CTE funding dramatically. That allowed for the department to equalize CTE funding across locations. And so for the first time, you had a welding student being funded at equal levels regardless of where they were sitting. This kind of builds off of that. Very high level would be 60% of the pot would be based on FTE, 40% of the pot would be based on incentives that are high quality indicators of CTE programming. Hopefully we'll see this one get across the finish line. I know that Dr. Hargis and her team have been working hard on this for the better part of a year, so we'll see if we can get this one done before the end of the session. Next slide, please. So another bill that is moving from Chair Tipton addresses, again, builds off of the early literacy work from the last few sessions. This one is addressing the 3 queuing system. It's House Bill 612. It's now awaiting assignment in the Senate. Don't know if this one makes it across the line this year or not, but if it does not, expect to see some version of it refiled again next year. House Bill 748 got amended in committee, is now over in Senate Education, and now will raise the amount of tax revenues that can be raised by districts and to be equalized, move from 15% to 17.5%. So again, that one's over in Senate Education. So obviously a lot of bills sitting over in Senate Education at the moment. And with 9 days left, we'll start to whittle that number down pretty quickly, I imagine. Next slide, please. So a lot of bills, and I'm moving very quickly in the interest of time, but I'll mention one last bill and then we'll talk about some resolutions. House Bill 828 made it out of committee this morning. It did pick up a committee sub. We haven't had a lot of chance to look at that as it just got posted this morning. The part that I wanted to note here, in addition to more certification language, this is the first bill that does include a teacher mentor program. So the commissioner and I have had quite a few conversations since her appointment back in the fall with members in both chambers about the need for some sort of revised K-PIP and K-TIP programs. So very excited to see this getting some consideration. 828 does not include an appropriation for that mentoring program, however. So we'll see if the Senate happens to include one tomorrow, but very excited that we're finally getting some discussion going in the form of legislation on that issue. So again, we just whittled 1,200 bills down to a handful in a few minutes. If there are questions, please drop them in the Q&A and I'll try to answer them as time allows. In addition, go to the next slide, please. In addition to the bills that are out there, there are a number of resolutions that you may want to take a look at. So the first 5 of these resolutions on this page have made it out of committee. And so they are a little further along. Those bottom 3 have not yet moved at all. But please take a look at these and make sure you know what's going on. There's a lot going to be happening in the interim, it looks like, especially with the SEEK task force. I know that a SEEK task force just ended a few years ago. So I think the intent here is maybe to pick up where that one left off and move forward a little bit. So with that, I'll see if there are any questions. A lot of time still left in the session for bills to move. Generally, it takes at least 5 days for a bill to go from start to the governor's desk. So with 9 days left in the legislative session before the veto period, still plenty of time for bills that haven't even been assigned to committee to make their move through the process. By the middle of next week, we'll have narrowed that window down a lot. Please remember that they can send a bill to the governor after they return from the veto period on those final 2 days. However, a bill that makes it to the governor at that point would not be able to be, any potential veto would not be able to be overridden. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Kinney if there are no questions.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for the update on the General Assembly. I'm quickly looking in the Q&A and I don't see any questions posted yet. Let me echo what Brian said about the speed that will happen now as we enter the closing days of the session. And to also, again, extend my appreciation to all of you that are talking with your legislators. making your voices heard and your concerns known. They very much like to hear from their local school district superintendent and staff in the local districts. And so, and also appreciate the conversations that KDE has been included in with superintendents, our educational partners, all trying to reach sort of common goals as we work with the General Assembly this session. So thank you very much for those efforts. I also want to, next slide please, wanted to share with you that our next Superintendent's Webcast will be on Thursday, April 11th, again from 2 to 4. Watch for that invitation to populate on your calendars. That will follow immediately following the April KBE meeting. Our next regular meeting is on April 9th and 10th, and so we'll have updates from our April board meeting and also, of course, an update on our commissioner search. For those of you that are already thinking and planning for spring break, I wish you safe travels and much needed and deserved relaxing time off. And then we'll be in the home stretch as we head toward graduations and end of school activities. As always, if you have any questions or concerns that I can address, please reach out to me directly or any of the great leadership staff here at the Kentucky Department of Education. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your afternoon.